Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia, and this is the summary for the day of 706 to 707 for the 30 to 31st of January. Let's start off with the frontline changes report, and we start off with Klishchiivka. So in the frontline changes report that I've published around 12 odd hours, over 12 hours ago, we talked about the Ukrainian forces capturing this area here, this area, and this is based on one geolocation of the Ukrainian forces being geolocated up here. However, over the part, in the latest post or report by Deep State UA, they claim that the Russian forces have taken this area here along the road. So let me zoom in a bit. Maybe my arrow is a bit fat. So the Russian forces have taken probably this tree line and this northern part of the entrenchment, and so this is actually kind of a slightly clash with the frontline changes that I've made. So which means that even though the Ukrainian forces is geolocated at this building here, the Russians are still pushing over in this northern part. So which means the entire entrenchment is not fully captured by the Ukrainian forces just yet. So this is actually very interesting that we have this clash in terms of how the thing has developed. So we will continue to monitor this part of the front line at the Bakhmut Front. The next frontline change is over here at the Novomykhailivka region in the Donetsk Front. So this is Donetsk city, and Novomykhailivka is over here. The Ukrainian mapping, Deep State UA have acknowledged that the Russian forces have basically taken this position. There is a heavy entrenchment at this position, which means that finally we have Deep State UA fully acknowledging that the Russian the total claims of the Russian mappings or the claims, and in fact they add on to this stronghold at this junction between the road and the tree line, and this is quite bad. This is actually the major stronghold that is defending the northern part of Novomykhailivka, because if we follow all the way down, you can see that there's actually no more stronghold. So this is taken. There is a straight road all the way down to Novomykhailivka, with the Ukrainians only have these three lines that's defending this area here, and maybe this one. So and there's already a huge gray zone around here, so the Russians can attack in these areas here, and yeah, this is going to be the main thing that is we're going to be watching out for. And the next frontline change is southwest of this position. The Russian forces is geolocated over here. This is exactly where the Russian claims are, and this actually this due to this geolocation is the Ukrainian claims is now invalidated. At least the Russians have actually have access, at least all the way to this point. But this is actually a geolocation of the front line. This is where they are fighting at. So we shall continue to monitor. I'm not sure about this one yet. This tree line, it could still be under Ukrainian control. It could be under Russian control. It's still a gray zone tentatively. There's an overlapping claims right now. And there's one more frontline change. It's over at Bohdanivka. So Bohdanivka is over at the Bakhmut Front. Mainly is the cemetery again. So the Ukrainian forces is geolocated in this forest line, which means that the Ukrainian forces have at least taken part of this cemetery, if not all of it. But we do not have the geolocation to prove that they have the entirety of the cemetery. So at least they are here. Maybe the Russians are on the other side of the tree line. We do not know. I'm quite sure that these graves are full of Ukrainian people. Because this is Ukraine, so but it's not the soldiers. I mean, this you can't really entrench yourself over here. It will be a very scary experience, to be entrenched. And imagine you dig in and then you find skeleton. That is so horrible. So that's all from the frontline changes report. So just talk a bit about weather. The Ukraine is slightly warm right now, just slightly. It's around 2 to 3 degrees above zero, which means that some of the ice may melt, but just some. I think largely it's still going to be pretty frozen. There is no snow the weather forecast seems to be all there's talking about all zeros. There's no snow right here. So yeah, so if it continues to warm, then things may get muddy. So that's something to take note of. So let's move on over to the strategic and tactical report. And before we reach there, there is a prisoner exchange between the Russia and Ukraine. This time round is a 1-to-1 exchange. Previously, it's always multiple to one. It's always more Ukrainian troops is exchanged for one Russian troop, like 3:1. 3 Russian soldiers exchange for 1 Ukrainian soldier. No, sorry, 3 Ukrainian soldiers exchange for 1 Russian soldier. And this time round is a 1:1, 195 for 195. And Ryba calculated that 443 Russian fighters has been rescued, or so-called exchanged, since the January of 2024, which also highlights how many Russian troops are actually captured by the Ukrainian forces. So despite though I know that a good percentage of the viewers for DPA is pro-Russia, and it seems that Russia is winning right now. The war is real. People still get captured, and people are are struggling. When you see the front line is not moving, sometimes it's not the Russians attack and just fail. The soldiers can die and get captured, and this is just the reality of war. The same goes for on the other side. When the Russians attack, the Ukrainians got overwhelmed, they surrender. So yeah, so just to put some things into context. So over at the border region between at the Kharkiv Sumy region, there is a geolocation of Lancets operating in the Sumy region, hitting Ukrainian forces at Khotin. So this is interesting because which means that we have Lancets now operating over at the border regions, and this geolocation or this video actually proved that, and this is going to be disastrous. And it also shows one thing: there is an abundance of Lancets that is now in the Russians' inventory, because usually you would want to use the Lancets in the active front lines because they might be precious because you don't have a lot of them. But now that they are using on the very secondary front line, which is over the border region where there is no active combat in terms of the frontline combat, which shows that the Russians actually have more than enough Lancet drones to be operating over these areas here. So in the Kharkiv region, north of Kharkiv, there is a surface-to-air missile system, the Aris-T, getting hit by a missile strike, or claims to be a missile strike. And so we shall continue to monitor this situation here, the bombardment and the targeting of Ukrainian forces over in this border region continues to be very interesting. As you notice, all the geolocations is around Sumy and Kharkiv, and instead it's not over in the Chernihiv region. It's only mainly in this area here. And this is also where I mentioned in the last conclusions that the Russians may be attacking from if they choose to open a new front line. So we shall continue to monitor. Over at the Kupyansk Front, the Russian offensive over at the Kupyansk Front has paused mostly. Only with fighting at Siversk is still being reported by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. Ukrainians are counter-attacking over at the Liman Lake and at Siversk. They are also trying to attack Avdiivka, trying to take back this lost town. Alright, other than that, there was just this geolocation of Russian forces over on the highway, which confirms that the Russians are indeed over at this area here. So the front line is actually now verified. So that's the important part. So we move on away from the Kupyansk Front. Over at the Svetlove Front, we have nothing. Over at the Kreminna Front. So this is Kreminna city. At the Kreminna Front, active combat continues. These Russians are concentrating now over at Terny, Yampolivka, and Torsky. Ukrainians are counter-attacking over in the same areas here. And on top of that, they are attacking Dibrova and attack south of Kuzmine. So this is the and also Russians are also attacking Vykorivka. So this is a strategic situation right now over at the at this Kreminna Front. There is an interesting report though. Or an unusual report, which is actually the Russian Defense Ministry talked about. They dropped this name called Zerzinskoye. Zerzinskoye is actually Merne. So this is actually a bit interesting that they mentioned Merne while they haven't captured Yampolivka. So there could be a possibility that as the Russians are pushing towards Novomykhailivka, they are also hitting positions in the rear, or they might have certain troops that is already in range, close to Merne. I'm not sure. That it prompts them to report that they are attacking Ukrainian troops over at Merne. So this is the interesting thing over at this Kreminna Front. We move south over at the Siversk Front. So this is Siversk city. Siversk is still getting bombarded. There is geolocations to prove that. This is actually by Lancets. Lancets are operating over at Siversk. And there is also geolocation of Ukrainian forces in the southern part of this industrial zone in the Novomykhailivka, which shows that the Ukrainian forces are still actively operating to ensure that the Russian offensive, mainly coming from the northeast, is deterred. So Russians are known previously to have captured the entire of this industrial zone. So now is under a gray zone kind of thing. Is contested. So and further south, fighting is reported at Verkhem-Okanyamsky, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. So this is the situation here. That at Vesele, over this area here, is something interesting happened. As mentioned in the Frontline report, Ukrainian forces is geolocated within Vesele, which means that the Ukrainian forces have counter-attacked or at least sent troops into Vesele, which is devoid of Russian troops. So I did mention this before, because Vesele is overseen by multiple hills all around the northern part of Vesele, and from these positions, the Ukrainian forces can rain fire on the Vesele if any Russian troops dares to entrench over there, and it will be disastrous for them if they try to entrench in Vesele. Which means Vesele largely, as per the Ukrainian claims, is true, that it is actually more or less more like gray zone than actually a Russian controlled territory. So but the Ukrainians are not there except for this geolocation, and according to the story is that the Ukrainian forces got spotted, they got attacked, and they are running away. So this is the situation right now. Vesele is, yeah, just take it with a pinch of salt, which is why the overlapping mapping clearly shows the real situation at Vesele. And so we move into the Bakhmut Front. This is Bakhmut city, and this is Bakhmut Front. At the Bakhmut Front, there is geolocation of some shelling. This is a Lancet attack south of Niu-York. And other than that, that's not very important. Just to show that the Lancets are now very commonplace. In the northern flank of this Bakhmut Front, Russian forces continue their offensive over at Bohdanivka and in the Kromove region. Ukrainian forces are geolocated all around the close positions near the cemetery. As I mentioned, there's a high chance that it is captured by the Ukrainian forces. Another geolocation that was interesting is that the Russians are geolocated in this area to be conducting an assault on a Ukrainian position. I'm not sure when is this recorded. It could be delayed and edited later. It could be also more for sure. I'm not sure. So it's a bit weird. So if this is more recent, then the Ukrainian positions is actually a lot more advanced, which means that the Russians are unable to entrench themselves in this open ground, which is why they have to abandon it, and the Ukrainian forces can easily retake these positions and take the certain entrenchments around this area here. So we shall continue to monitor and see how this progress. And other FPV drone strikes over at Klishchiivka. At this position, I think this is a Lancet strike. So as I mentioned, Lancet is now common. It's basically like FPV drone right now, just a big one, and they can take out vehicles. So moving into the southern flank. Okay, before that, talk about Ivanivsky. Russian forces is still attacking Ivanivsky, and Russian forces is geolocated just off Bakhmut city. Over in the southern flank, the Russian forces are continuing their offensive in this southern flank. We're fighting reported in the north over at Klishchiivka, at Avdiivka and Kupyansk. So this is the strategic situation in this area here. Geolocations are generally, as already mentioned, and Ukrainian forces geolocated west of Klishchiivka. Bilohorivka, north of Bilohorivka, there is a geolocation. Again, it's Lancet. So you can see the Lancets are literally hunting the Ukrainian forces actively across all the front line. Moving further from the Bakhmut Front, over at the New-York Front, this is New-York Front. The Russian forces are attacking Pivdene, with Ukrainian forces attacking near New York. So this is the battle, I would say skirmish in the region near Holivka. And so far the situation remains very stagnant. So we shall continue to monitor to see how this goes. Over at the Avdiivka Front, this is Avdiivka city. At the Avdiivka Front, Russian forces continue their offensive, but the reports of the fighting is very limited. We have only fighting reported at Kurdabalka region near the filtration station. There is fighting reported at Avdiivka itself, Pervomayske as well as Nevelske. And this is about it. The entire northern flank is actually not mentioned, so there's nothing much to talk about. There is multiple strikes on Ukrainian forces within Avdiivka city itself. There is another FPV drone strike south of Umanske. And then in the north, we have Ukrainian forces being geolocated along the railway line, continue to show that the Russian forces have made no progress, and Russian forces geolocated attacking at Stepove, which reportedly failed, which also shows is also reflected by the lack of change over the frontline report. Over in the southern flank, we have some changes in terms of the frontline changes. Ukrainian forces geolocated along this street. Russian forces geolocated further west of the southern neighborhood that the Russians are currently battling for. So Ukrainian forces is actively counter-attacking the Russian forces while the Russians are trying to push and capture the rest of the neighborhood. This is currently still ongoing. We shall continue to monitor and see how this progress. So we move on away from the Avdiivka Front into the Donetsk Front. So this is the Donetsk Front. At the Donetsk Front, over at this Marinka Novomykhailivka sector, the Russian forces are attacking Krasnohorivka, Georgievka, Boyeda. In the north of Novomykhailivka, at the Novomykhailivka itself, which is probably referring to the north, and also over at the southwestern part of Novomykhailivka. Ukrainian forces are counter-attacking over at the Novomykhailivka region, and so this is the strategic situation over in this sector, the Marinka sector of the Donetsk Front. The multiple geolocation basically shows the Ukrainian forces continue to get bombarded by Russian forces. I think Boyeda is by FPV drone, Krasnohorivka is by artillery. So these are all geolocated stuff, and the Russians are pushing in this direction. As I mentioned before, the aim is the highway, and this highway will cut off supplies to Veleda and cause reinforcement to Veleda be a lot more troublesome. So over at the eastern flank of the Donetsk Front, Russian forces are attacking Veleda. Limited, don't see as an assault, it's more like the fire attack, fire mission, and also attacks resumed over at Zolota Nyva. So the last attack was reported on the 29th. There was a one-day pause, and then it will resume on the 31st. So this push continues to be something that I will be watching for. Zolota Nyva, this is actually a very interesting, because losing Zolota Nyva would alter the entire strategic balance over in this front line. Over at the Zaporizhzhia Front, so this is Zaporizhzhia city, and this is the Zaporizhzhia Front. At the Velika Novosilka sector, we have Russian forces continue their attacks in this area here. So the Russian forces are attacking Uruzhaine and the Staromayoske. They are also attacking the north of Prione. There is geolocation of Ukrainian forces getting hit by TOS-1A south of Rivnopil, and there's also geolocation of Russian forces attacking Ukrainian positions. So this fighting over this Prione region is getting a bit fierce, and it's very interesting. They are fighting this fiercely over this area here. We will continue to monitor and see what is up, and how the front line is going to change in this area here. So we move on away from Velika Novosilka sector. We have nothing over at Huyapole sector. We move into the Orikhiv sector. So at the Orikhiv sector, as usual, the Russians are attacking Robotine. as well as on the western part of Verbove. There is reports of attack against Ukrainian troops near Malatomashka, and there is this new report about attack near Orikhiv. So according to the Russian Defense Ministry, they mentioned that their units supported by artillery struck Ukrainian forces over at Orikhiv, or close to Orikhiv, which is very unusual because Orikhiv is still a little bit distance away. So we will continue to monitor what this is supposed to mean. And geolocation at Robotine continues to confirm the front line that the Ukrainian forces still holding the fortified positions south of Robotine. So we move on away over at this Kayamsky sector. So at the Kayamsky sector, the Russian forces are reported to have attacked Shebaki. So this is interesting because we haven't heard of Shebaki being attacked since forever. So it's been a long time. So we'll continue to monitor the Kayamsky sector. The Russian forces have been probing this area with attack at Petikaki, Zerevyanki, Kayamsky, Stepove. It is just random. So it is definitely just to make the Ukrainian forces guessing. And we move on over at the Kherson Front. At the Kherson Front, in this area here, the Ukrainian forces have reinforced Krynky. So this is the wrong icon, sorry. So reinforcement has arrived at Krynky, according to Ryba, and the Ukrainian forces is attacking outwards again from Krynky, trying to expand their beachhead. Russian forces is still being reported by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry to be attacking Krynky. However, geolocation of Ukrainian forces getting hit, their boats getting hit, continues to spell out how treacherous the situation is for the Ukrainian forces that is trying to operate in the direction of Krynky. And other than that, there is of course a frontline change that was already mentioned in the frontline report of Ukrainian forces along this coastal village south of Kherson, which is actually no surprise that the Ukrainians are in control of that position, although strategically it's not very important. And there is also a geolocation of this is very interesting. A Ukrainian position over at Bakhmut is getting hit, but this time around there's a new weapon that is being mentioned, Garam drones. So Garam drones, these suicide drones are usually used to hit infrastructures by the Russians. They use it as a kind of like a slow moving cruise missile, but this time around, this is the first time I see it being used on Ukrainian troops positions. So this is actually very interesting, and it's not just one drone. They send multiple drones in this footage posted by Military Summary. So this is something to note. It's very interesting to see Garam drones are being used in this kind of capacity. So it might suggest an increase in the availability of these Garam drones to be used by frontline troops, because these are being used more like a strategic weapon, like a cruise missile, and to be used in such a tactical semi-strategic way is very unusual. So it could spell that they have a lot more of these drones that they can now use it like a Iskander. So we will continue to monitor and see how this goes. And yeah, so this is the strategic and tactical report. So that's it. Some conclusions. According to Putin, is that the POW exchange is going to continue despite whatever happened to the air crash, the shooting down of the transport plane. They will still continue to exchange all these POWs, and it kind of spells this very different Russian approach, because the impression of Russia is Russia during the Soviet Union time and before, during the Russian Empire, it's always that they see people as very dispensable. They don't really care that much about the people. At least that's the impression that was given to the rest of the world. And this time around, Putin seems to have a very different approach. Maybe because of demographic, there is really the demographic numbers are really not that good. Russia is making whatever they could to make sure that they can get back as many people as they can, and that's actually very, very different. Ukrainians are also very interesting. They shot down the plane, And they are still going ahead with the prisoner exchange, which is also a surprise to me. I thought that the prisoner exchange is going to be suspended for some time, but no, they continue as per usual. So 195 for 195 it also shows this 1-to-1 exchange is very unusual because it's always been 2-to-1 or 3-to-1. So it could also mean that now the Russia is a bit more confident in the ability, the positions, and to get back all these people. Maybe they know that the Ukrainians need these 195 servicemen back so that they can be sent to the front line again. So these troops are more precious now for the Ukrainians to exchange back. So that could be a possibility. And again, I want to talk about Lancets. Lancets are being used so extensively right now over every front line. In fact, even over the border region is just concerning. If you are on the pro-Ukrainian side, or if you are looking from a Ukrainian perspective, this is a very, very worrying development, because Lancets are highly effective, super highly effective, and of course Lancets do not operate alone. Lancets are operating with a surveillance drone, along with surveillance drones and other assets to try to spot targets, and Lancets are then launched, because now modern Lancets are super fast. The X-Wing version flies super fast. It's not the old biplane version. Now it's like a Star Wars version that can fly super fast, and it will hit the target, and it will destroy the target. So Lancets are becoming really, really scary, and they're operating on a daily basis. So many of these geolocation. Imagine having videos being released on Lancets every single day. That is unimaginable. It's just way too much Lancets that is being used right now, which means being the Ukrainian forces, it is a bit like the game-changing ness of the HIMARS introduction into the Ukraine war. It forces the Russians to operate very differently in the rear. I think this Lancet is now causing so much problems for the Ukrainians that the Ukrainians will have to operate very differently in the rear as well, and which means your vehicles parking in the rear will have to be concealed as well. You cannot just park it anywhere. If you park it anywhere, it will get destroyed. So now everything have to be concealed, and the worst part is that the Ukrainians do not have a equivalent weapon right now, like Lancet, to be used back against the Russians. So this is another imbalance between Russia and Ukraine's military right now. There is rumors. I think Victoria Nuland is in Ukraine, and she mentioned about some surprise, and linking with some other news. There's some other type of bombs or homing or glide bombs that will be given to Ukraine, and so the Ukraine Air Force is going to have some glide bombs to be used against Russian positions, which is going to be cheaper than the HIMARS missiles, but it's equally effective. So we will look forward and look out for such developments. Although it is to note that the Ukrainians seems to be using a bit of the glide bombs already, which is the bombs with guiding or homing capabilities. But we will continue to monitor, and we will see how this progress. It's very, very bizarre that it took 2 years, because we are coming to the 2 years anniversary. It took 2 years for them to give Ukraine some basic weapons for the Air Force, which is I don't know. I don't really like how NATO is supporting Ukraine, because if you want to support the support fully, or whatever the support they're giving Ukraine is like giving your spare change to a beggar, kind of situation is horrible. Although, of course, as I mentioned in the headline report that I posted on the main channel, $21 billion, the new $21 billion for 2024 is not small change. It's also not spare change. So yeah, spare change. So the Russian currently is still over the Kupyansk Front. I think in this region here, I think the Russian forces are currently just fortifying or consolidating their captures, I believe, in the Kreminna Avdiivka region. I think they are currently consolidating, and I think in the next few days we'll see the Russians attacking again in this area here, and the most likely target is going to be Berestove, Pischane, as well as Kupyansk. So these three towns is going to be next. We will continue to see how this goes. I think now they are in the consolidation phase, which is why we saw the Ukrainian counterattack. Kreminna, as usual, nothing much to talk about. It's always the same shit. Over at the Siversk Front, again, there is all these bombardments on Siversk is very interesting. They are hitting Siversk quite a lot lately, and Lancets operating on Siversk as well. We will continue to monitor. This is very unusual. It might spell Russians' intention at the Siversk Front. And so Vesele, I already mentioned before, is very interesting. As my prediction have came true, the Ukrainian control of the hills made it impossible for Russia to actually hold any positions at Vesele. So until the Russians make one major push, at least probably from the east, taking some of this hill and then attack westward, capturing the rest of the hill, Vesele will never be secure. So it's not going to be a secure town. We're going to see Ukrainian forces operating at Vesele at any time, because there's not going to be any Russian troops over there. The Ukrainians, as per geolocated over here, shows that they can operate into Vesele at any time they want, of course at the risk of dying. So so that's the Vesele situation. Very interesting. Bakhmut remains more or less the same. This battle in the southeastern part of Bohdanivka is like a joke right now. I'm getting sick of the cemetery jokes. So I'm not going to talk about cemetery jokes anymore. But again, Lancet operating in this area here, amazing. So nothing much to talk about Avdiivka. I mentioned before about the importance of Avdiivka already in the previous conclusions. So over at the Avdiivka Front, situation got a bit bogged down, I think, for the Russians. Russians are pushing in this southern neighborhood, but the Ukrainian counterattacks is really putting them into a lot of difficulty to move around. The front line have basically went stagnant. Russian forces attacking over at the filtration station continues to be a concern, because this area here is so far from the rest of the front line. Reinforcement to this position is going to be really troublesome. So it's not impossible, just troublesome. So we shall continue to monitor these areas here. And Novomykhailivka particular is very interesting, because after I mentioned about the Ukrainian disclaim of this area here of the Manageri fortified position, now they have conceded that the Russian forces have taken this heavy fortification as well in this position. So in the span of like a few days, 2-3 days, suddenly the Ukrainians have the Ukrainian mapping has basically aligned themselves with the Russian mapping in the space of 2-3 days, and I don't believe that the Russian forces captured this within 2-3 days. So most likely is that they are now just slowly coming up to date with the actual situation on the ground, maybe due to certain information, some geolocation that came out, that they are no longer able to delay this information. So because the Russian claims in this area has been a long time coming, so it is a bit it was very concerning for me, because this much of a conflict of the mapping is very concerning. You know, it shows that there is a huge disparity between the two, and now we have this all acknowledged. It's very good. Now we know the front line is definitely around this area here. So we definitely now know the real situation right now. Russian forces continue to push towards the road, and I mentioned before, this is a major artery between Voleda and Konstantinivka. So we will continue to monitor and see how far the Russians can push. It's going to be very difficult because this is a very huge expanse of land. And of course, I also mentioned many times already, I'm very concerned about Zolota, Nyva. We will continue to monitor. I'm not so concerned about the rest, like the Prione region. This is not very concerning for me. And we move over the Orikhiv sector. The Russians continue to threaten a double pincer. I would say threaten because it doesn't feel very committed by the Russians. with the attack towards Malatomashka and in this area of Novoandriivka, Novodanilivka, or Kiev, this area here. So this outer pincer continues to be very uncommitted, and the inner pincer continues to be very positional in nature. It doesn't feel like the Russians are really in a rush to capture ground. So whatever happenings at the Orikhiv sector is starting to look a lot like Kreminna Front, where there's a lot of fighting, but the front line never changes. And of course, Kayamsky sector, as I mentioned before, the probing continues. So we have Stepove previously over on the 24th, and then we have Pyatikaki, Zarebianki, Kayamsky is the last one. Now we have Shibaki. So the Russians are probing everywhere. This is going to be very difficult for the Ukrainians to move around. If you look closer, you can see that the roads are all the small roads in the rear positions. And the main road over here is definitely going to be heavily monitored by the Russian forces. So moving troops around this area here is very troublesome for the Ukrainian forces. So all this probing is going to just create more logistical problems for the Ukrainian forces. And of course, surprise, surprise, Ukrainian forces reinforced Krynky. You know, just as I was starting to doubt myself, I was thinking, is Krynky still around? Is it gone? Is it because we have no reports about Krynky for a long time already, maybe a week or 2 weeks? We only have very vague information from the Ukrainian Defense Ministry talking about the Russians are still pushing the bridgeheads, and suddenly we have the reports from Ryba talking about Krynky again. So yeah, Krynky holds. And anyway, this is the SITREP for the day of 706 to 707 for the 30th to 31st of January. Do press the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next update.